Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Welcome back to Whiskey Congress. Steve and I are together in-house again. We have a new whiskey to review, Colonel E.H. Taylor's small batch bottled in bond bourbon. So I just looked at the bottle and saw it was 100 proof, and I was like shocked because it is so fucking smooth for 100 proof.
Well, bottled in bond means it's going to be 100 proof, but yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Is that my definition?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Remember
we talked about it.
We
talked about this. I did not remember that was a legit requirement. I gave it a 91. Caramel flavor is really good. Like it's smooth as silk, and it's got some kick to it. So we've been on a bottle and bond kick for a while. This is one I grabbed in New Jersey that was tough to find in Ohio. So I'm going to sprain my arm patting myself on the back for recovering this. Well, go ahead.
So, one, good job securing it. And so the issue with this is the reason why it's tough to find, the way liquor works in Ohio, and this is similar to most other states, it's controlled by the state. Right. So the state technically owns all the liquor that you see in the liquor stores, right? And so when I go to my local liquor store not far from my house, I say, hey, I'm looking for a bottle of XYZ. The first thing they do is they go to, their site, which is a state site, and they let me know if it's even available in Ohio, right? And then so if it's available in Ohio, then what they'll say is, all right, well, we'll put in a request for it, and maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't.
All right.
And so Colonel E.H. Taylor is one of those things where maybe they get a limited number in Ohio. Stores request whatever, and then the state decides who gets what and how much they get. And so maybe my store gets it, maybe they don't. And that's what kind of creates the scarcity, and it all depends on where you live and where the state decides the bottles are going to go. What I do know, talking to people around, whether it's people that like bourbon that are in the powerlifting community or in the legal community or in all the various communities that I'm involved in.
You run in some distinctly different circles.
I run in some weird circles. But talking to people, what I gather is Akron gets a lot of the good stuff for whatever reason. I don't know why.
That's weird.
It is weird, but I don't know. But they do. Because when I need something, I've got a guy who lives in the Akron-Canton area, and I say, hey, have you seen this? And he's like, oh, yeah, down the street, such and such store. Akron's about 45 minutes away from us, Akron-Canton area.
Right.
Pro Football Hall of Fame, home of the Akron Zips, all that fun stuff. But Akron gets a lot of the good stuff, and I'm not sure why that is. And then also,
weirdly, could it be a LeBron thing? Could there be?
Okay. No, I highly doubt it. LeBron's a red wine guy. It's not because of LeBron, but maybe. I don't know. Bath is.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And Bath is a town in Ohio that's particularly wealthy for people who don't know.
And it's not far from
that area.
Akron.
Right.
And then down closer to Cincinnati, obviously because it's close to Kentucky, that may have something to do with it. But in those counties over there, they tend to get some of the harder things that just whatever reason we don't get a lot of here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, or we just don't get. So that's kind of why some of this stuff is hard to get. Now, because some people, if you're listening to us and you live in Michigan, per se, you'll say, well, Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch, bottle and bond, that's easy for us to get. Right? And for whatever reason, yeah, it is. And for them, they can get it there. Right? I mean, it's, you go, most of your counties out there, you can walk into a liquor store and you can find it. So it's interesting how different localities have different access to various whiskeys and labels and things like that. So back to this, the Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch, bottle and bond, it's Colonel E.H. Taylor is one of my favorites. It's out of the Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Okay.
And this offering from them, not just this particular one, because they have a few others, but this is basically like their introductory bottle.
All right.
And incredibly smooth, incredibly balanced. Right off the rip, you put your nose to it, and you smell it, and you can smell the caramel. You can smell a hint of like dried fruit. You can smell the oak, and it just it stands out when you smell it, and then when you taste it, all those tastes transfer right into your mouth, where you're just like, wow, this tastes really good. There's a little bit of floral. There, you can taste the wood. You're like, is that dried raisins? Are those dried apricot? What's going? There's a lot going on from a flavor aspect. And then when you look at it and you say, wow, that's 100 proof, right? Like that.
I'm with you. That's checking the Steve box right there.
Right, like that. I mean, just with the alcohol content and such a balanced flavor. It's hard. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos. If I see a bottle, I will buy it. I've never not seen a bottle and not bought it.
Okay.
Period.
I just remember texting you from New Jersey and saying, "Hey, $50-something a bottle. Should I buy it?" And you said, "Can you get two?"
And I said, "Buy two."
and
that's why at that price, it's definitely worth it. So I think.
What did you score it at?
Oh, I bad job by me. It's a 94 for me.
94, okay.
94 by me. And listen, they get better from here in terms of what Colonel E.H. Taylor, what they offer. They get better from this. This is very good, and I think that they, in terms of a bourbon, they have figured out how to create a good tasting, balanced bourbon with distinct flavors. There's nothing about this bourbon that turns me off.
Oh, I hear you.
You know,
and I would never think of making a mixed drink with this. This is a bourbon you drink neat.
Right. I may drop a Luxardo cherry in it.
Okay.
Period. That's it.
Only because they're amazing.
Only because those cherries are just so succulent.
Yes, they are.
But other than that,
please don't ever say succulent again when we're the only people in the room. I'm just joking.
I'm talking about a cherry. I'm not talking about your ass.
Which is not succulent in any way whatsoever.
Okay,
that's
weird.
Took a turn. You know what? I started that problem. I'll own it.
Right.
So anyway, Colonel E.H. Taylor, small batch, 100 proof, bottled and bond, really solid stuff. We usually aren't that far apart in scoring, but we both put it over the 90.
Yeah,
mark.
And maybe and part of the problem is that I've had it before. It's obviously high on my list.
I'm enjoying it.
So it's hard. You're going to be hard pressed to get me to, not give it a high score. Given.
So what are you going to do with if we come up with one of their other offerings? You give them a 94, and you said this is their ground level. We're going to hit the 97 level.
Maybe depending.
Okay.
Let's
see what happens.
We'll have to search, hunt, and find.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of good whiskeys coming up too. So we've got some exciting stuff.
We do.
But moving on from whiskey, we have this week in politics. And before I go bashing Trump, which I will do with abandon at some point today, I'm sure, the one thing that he's taken on that I actually am very excited about is criminal justice reform. And so, what's it called?
So it's called the First Step Act, and it's. I was happy to see this. I want to see it signed. I want to see it. I want to see it become law. There's some interesting things about it, and I was able to go through the entire act and look at kind of what is on the table and what they're talking about, because sometimes they put these things out there and they say, oh, it's a criminal justice bill and it's good and great, and then you read it and you're like, this sucks. There's no benefits to this whatsoever. But I took the time to go through it. Title by title, and kind of pull out what I thought were some of the key, aspects of the act. And so, first and foremost, this only applies on the federal level.
Okay, that's all the president can do, though.
Right, but it's important because I think what gets lost is people talk about these things, in sort of a blanket fashion with a broad brush, and they assume that it applies to people. Like if you're just Joe Blow and you get picked up in Akron, Ohio, that this will apply to you, and unless unless it's a federal case, it won't. So we start there, and then you move on through, and one of the big thing is that they're establishing a risk and needs assessment system to assess and classify and figure out why, and basically classify the chances of recidivism or reduce recidivism, repeat offenders, trying to prevent repeat offenders, doing risk assessments, and trying to figure out like what are the things that prisoners or convicts need. And sorry for my insensitive phrasing there, but I'm trying to work through this. But
okay.
What are the things that people that are being released from prison, what do they need to not end up back in jail? And so they're looking at things at housing, grouping, program assignments, and they're looking at incentivizing people beyond like, hey, you're not going to be in jail, but better incentives and rewards for participating in these various programs that will prevent them from falling back into the criminal justice system. Okay. And I think that's really important. And they're using evidence-based recidivism reduction programs, and that's in the bill, right? Like you have to use something that there's evidence to prove that this is an effective method, and I think that's critical, right? That we're looking at. We said, okay, based off of so many experiences, so much research, so much data, we know that this helps reduce people going back to jail by a certain percentage, a significant percentage. So we're going to use those methods to help prevent people from ending up back in our system. That's key, right? That's a huge key into solving some of the issues that we have. Now listen, I'll tell you right now that this is only part of the issue, right? There's a bigger issue in terms of how do we keep people out of jail in the first place? Federal, right, local, whatever. But this is still addressing the back end problems, and so I'll take that I will take that at the moment. I will absolutely take it, and I will say if they can get this signed in, I'll appreciate it. So aside from that, the Bureau of Prisons needs to implement the risk and needs assessment system. Another issue here is that they're allowing prisoners to earn 54 days per year of the sentence imposed instead of the 54 days per year of the sentence actually served. And just to break that down, what that means is that it makes it easier for the prisoners to accrue the good time credit.
Good behavior,
right?
Right.
And so that's important because especially when you're dealing, with some of these lower level offenders. Sorry, too much comic book thought this week, but when you're dealing with some of these lower level offenders, their ability to accrue that good time credit, especially if they're not going to be involved with some of the nefarious things that go on in prisons and they can avoid it, then they should have an opportunity to get out early, especially if they participate in these programs that are going to help prevent them from falling back into a life of crime.
And let's be clear, we're talking about typically non-violent drug offenses.
Yes.
So when we're talking about violent offenders, we're
talking about non-violent offenders of various types,
right. but typically
predominantly
drug offenders.
Non-violent drug offenders,
which is, we've talked enough on this show about how that imprisonment of people who abuse substances going to jail is a problem. We argued back and forth about Ohio issue 1 last year, but I do want to give credit to Donald Trump and to Jared Kushner. I don't even know what his passion about this comes from.
Well, I mean, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, they're Democrats. They're people who, yes, they got a lot of money, but they're bleeding heart liberals whose dad was also a Democrat and a liberal who jumped ship because he saw an opportunity to become president. But there's a couple other things that I want to talk about this act that I think are important.
Roll.
This next one, to me, is very, 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 very important. Cannot restrain pregnant women or women in postpartum recovery. And that, to me, like, you have to understand how dehumanizing that is to have a pregnant woman in restraints when she's 6 months pregnant, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant, or she just had a baby, and then they put her in shackles and they put her in restraints for various reasons. It's very dehumanizing, and it happens predominantly to, black women and not, or I should say, women of color. And it's a very dehumanizing thing. It impacts the psyche of a person who's filled with all sorts of various hormones because they're in the process of, creating a child inside them, or they've just had a child, and it has such an adverse effect on the mental health and the mental stability of women who are already in a precarious situation. I think that is something that should be adopted not only federally, but at every level of government. You should not be allowed to shackle a pregnant woman, restrain her to a bed or whatever, unless it's just absolutely necessary because of
physical danger
physical danger to herself or others, and that needs to be clearly defined in terms of the reasons why they would have to put restraints on a pregnant woman. A couple other things here, going down the line. Some of the things that I don't like about this, and I'm not sure if I like it or I don't like it, but so they're expanding the market reach of Unicor. You know what Unicor is?
I have no idea what Unicor is.
Do you know what FPI is, the Federal Prison Industries?
I do not.
Okay, well, I'm familiar with Unicor.
Fortunately, you're going to
Unicor FPI. Did you watch the documentary on the 13th?
Yes.
On Netflix.
Oh
okay.
God.
Okay.
So
yes,
that was yes. We talked about that on a previous show.
Right. So they talked about Unicor briefly in that documentary, but what it is. Essentially, it's a work program within the federal prison system where prisoners they basically make various products, and then those products are put out to sale in the free market, right?
So it's prison labor.
It's prison labor.
Slave labor is a fair.
Yeah, I mean they get paid
They get paid prison wages,
right,
which is like $1 an hour.
Well, hold on. Yes, in most cases they get paid prison wages, which is less than $3 an hour. There are some instances where they can get, whatever the local prevailing wage is, but they take so many fees and things out that it's well below minimum wage by the time all the fees are taken out. But what they've done is expanded the market in this act. They've expanded the market for those goods, or the areas in which those goods can be sold. And that doesn't sit well with me because it leads me to believe that if we're trying to fix the criminal justice system, that means we want less people. If you're really trying to fix it, then that means you want to cycle less people through your system. But when you expand the market to say the goods
at a profit motive,
right? Then all of a sudden, I don't feel comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable with Unicor or FPI. The fact that you're using this prison labor, and if you look at when it was enacted in 1934, I mean, you're still in Jim Crow times and Jim Crow era, and so it was. Then you have that whole argument about, the 14th Amendment, and so there's a lot of questions here on where that fits in the grand scheme of things and why that's in there. Some of the other highlights, I guess, of this, you can no longer place a prisoner in a facility that's more than 500 miles away from where their primary residence is.
That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal because, there are a lot of instances of people who, had, they committed a crime in Chicago and got placed somewhere in California or
Missouri
Texas
or whatever, yeah.
Kansas or what have you. And that isolation is problematic. How do you reintroduce a person who has had limited or no contact with their family or close acquaintances over however many years? So that's, I think,
that's definitely a big deal,
right? That's critical.
The ability of a family to get to see a loved one. Again, speaking mostly of nonviolent offenders, but I've talked multiple times on this show about the Truth and Justice podcast, and a guy like Ed Ace was 3 hours away from his wife, so you can't go see him on a Tuesday night,
right?
Sorry to derail
right. Yeah, no, but I mean, that's key. Now, 500 miles is still
it's a long way,
right? But I mean, it's
doable on a weekend at least,
right? I mean, you can.
I've driven 500 miles on a weekend,
right? I mean, we've both done a lot of traveling, and you realize like it's not great, it's not ideal, but I mean, it's better than it's better than some of the things.
It's not completely restrictive to the point of practically not happening.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So. The other a couple other things. There's only a few more here. The Bureau of Prisons must place low-risk prisoners on home confinement for the maximum amount of time permitted, and I think that's important because it's such a good alternative to putting someone into a prison facility. A prison facility is designed to really dehumanize you, right? And talking about prison and talking about criminal justice, I will overuse the term dehumanize because that's what happens. You're no longer a person. You're no longer a member of society. They do so many things to strip away your humanity while you're in prison. And especially when you're a person of color, that it
redefines you, right?
It redefines you, and it becomes hard to then reintegrate,
right?
Because you get reprogrammed, and it becomes hard to reintegrate into a society where people don't understand your thought process. They don't understand how you had to live and what your schedule was, and the constant threats on your safety and life. And so, it's important to think about how. How do we address some of these issues? And some of these issues are, I've got a low-level offender here. Does this person really need to be placed in prison, or can we punish them by restricting their movement and making certain requirements, their standard for punishment?
When you're dealing with we're talking almost exclusively about nonviolent offenders here, and you brought up 13th, the podcast. Was it Khalif Brower? What was the name of the kid that killed himself? That is one of the most tragic stories of our criminal justice system that I can think of.
You know what? Hold on, pause. I said the 14th Amendment earlier.
You did. 13th,
God damn it. I'm so sorry.
I didn't want to be a dick and
Shame
correct
on
you.
me. Shame on me. Oh, my God.
You said it right the first time, but then you said it wrong.
And then my constitutional law professor right now, if he's listening...
Turning over in his grave, he's not even dead?
He's not even dead. Like, he's not turning over in his grave. He's getting on a plane to come here and punch me in the face. But, yeah, anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
I really hope the doorbell rings right now.
That's the one...
Steve...
That's the one time I wish you would have been,
bit a dick and jumped in?
Right, bit a dick and corrected me.
All right, well, I didn't. I'll start doing it more. But that
slow your roll there, champ. Slow your roll.
But that story is one of the most tragic ever, right?
Yeah.
He was like 17 years old. He's accused of stealing a backpack. Mm-hmm. He ends up in Rikers. He says, I won't plead guilty to something I didn't do.
Yep. Gets
into a bunch of fights in prison with guards and whatever because...
3 years, by the way.
3 years without ever going to fucking trial.
Yep.
And then gets out and commits suicide.
Ultimately ends up committing suicide.
The most blatant, heartbreaking incident and the failures of the criminal justice system
that I can think of off the top of my
head. What's that?
This wouldn't apply to him.
Because it's New York,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
You're right.
This wouldn't apply to him. This wouldn't have helped him.
But to give credit where credit's due, if things change at the federal level, then they should, could change at the state level.
It's possible. And some of your more...
it's New York. We're talking New York here. New York, liberal New York.
There are states that will fall in line with what the federal government does.
Right.
And you have others that won't. But it's still a good first step. There's one more that I want to bring up that really I think is critical.
Right.
And this is closely related to the pregnant women not being restrained, but the Bureau of Prisons has to make tampons and
feminine hygiene
products available free of charge. Now think about what that is. I mean, because can you imagine going to prison as a woman? You have your period. You're in you're of age where that shit happens from
which most women in prison are of that age,
right? And you get there, and you need a tampon. All right, well, $7 or whatever.
Right.
Whatever the cost commissary, whatever. And you don't have money. You don't you just get there and you just show up. I mean, your period's not going to stop because you're in prison. Right? Your period's not going to stop or slow down because you don't have money to pay for tampons in jail. So what the hell do they do? Right? Now, I'm not one of those people that's incredibly grossed out by periods. I mean, they are what they are. It's blood. Okay. It's really not the end of the world. I've bled. I got a issue on my shin right now from where I had a bike riding incident in Columbus.
Okay, I know nothing about this.
We'll talk about that at another time, maybe at the end of the show, or maybe after a little bit more whiskey. But either way, I mean, it's blood. It's not the end of the world. It's not the grossest thing. There's a hygiene issue there, though, right? I mean, there is a hygiene issue there, and so a woman shouldn't have to just sit there and bleed all over her clothes when there's a perfectly fine solution, and it's not like they're the most. It's not like this is something that's going to cost the Bureau of Prisons millions and millions of dollars, right? I mean, so it makes sense that they do it, and again, it goes to the dehumanizing factor, right? I mean, it's just like, you're on your period, you're in prison, sit there and bleed into your jumpsuit, and then good luck with that. And it's not right, but this rectifies that on the federal level.
On the federal level, okay. Honestly, Steve, if you'd given me 100 guesses as to what would come out of this, and because you researched this much more than I did not know that. But those are great points, and those are big deals. I mean, I listen to the Alan Cox show all the time, and Erica Lauren from the Alan Cox show always talks about how those things shouldn't be taxed because they're medical issues. All right, I've been nice to Trump for way too long.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. So Jim Acosta CNN sued the federal government for Jim Acosta losing his right to have a federal press pass, or a White House press pass. And a judge ruled that the press pass had to be reinstated. I have opinions on this. I'm curious about yours.
No, I want to start with you. Go.
Okay. I don't like it. Oddly, I don't. Jim Acosta is a bit of a dick. I obviously have made my opinions about the president very clear, but I don't think a press... I do think it's a dangerous zone, because if...
You're right. You're already starting to get off track. Go
It's
ahead.
a dangerous zone because I think that if you ever restrict what the president can and cannot be subjected to in terms of questioning, that's something I'm not comfortable with. But the fact that Jim Acosta as an individual cannot be, or can't, the idea that they can't say, you were a douchebag and you can't come here anymore, I think they should have the right to do that. I mean, maybe not to an organization, but to an individual. And I think that the whole issue with him was overblown. I don't think he physically manhandled a female White House aide and all this. I thought it was bullshit. But I do think that they should have the right to say, you know what? You didn't play nice. You're in the penalty box.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell you you're off base.
Bring it.
But so I don't like the fact that I don't like how this went down with the judge today. But that's your reasoning is not why I don't like it. The reason why I don't like it, Jim Acosta. You know what essentially happened? they rejected Jim Acosta's fast pass to
Okay.
the White House. And what I
The
mean
equivalent
by that,
of TSA pre-check.
what I mean by that is they said he can keep his White House pass, but every day he's got to get approval from the White House to come in. Now, what he had before that was a pass that said you can come in every day no matter what. There's no pre-approval required. Okay? And so
TSA pre-check.
TSA pre-check, exactly. And so what they said was your fast pass booted. Now you have to go through and get approved every day before you come in. And so my issue is he wasn't denied access.
All right.
Right? He wasn't denied full-blown access. What they said was now we're going to have to double check and make sure that you're not going to be an asshole every day that you come in. Right? And so what I don't like about this is that if I'm looking at this as a judge, I'm saying, well, you still technically can have access. You just have to jump through more hoops than you did before. And the reason why is because of your behavior during a press conference. Now, and his behavior was an issue. And let me put it to you this way. If I'm in a courtroom and I'm an attorney and I'm making a point and the judge says, all right, counselor, enough. Sit down. And I continue to go on. The judge says, if you don't stop, I'm going to hold you in contempt. And I say, no. And I keep going. And I keep making my point. What happens to me?
Well, I don't think that's a completely fair equivalency.
Why?
Because it's not a courtroom.
It's not a courtroom, but you're in front of the
You're in
President
front
of the United States.
Fair. Okay. All right. No, because
The president, listen, the president doesn't have to answer your question. There's no,
Right.
like
No,
you ask
fair,
a question,
fair.
the president doesn't have to call on you because there are plenty of people, there are plenty of news outlets that don't get called on, who don't get their questions answered. There's no obligation by the president to answer your specific question or to even hear your question. So this idea that you can stand there with the microphone and not give it up and continue to run your mouth, right, and have there be no consequence is kind of ridiculous, right? Now listen, I believe that what Jim Acosta's point, the questions that he was asking, okay, great, right? You stood on your soapbox. And you did what you wanted to do, but there's a consequence for that, right? This is your action, and this is the reaction. This is the consequence for it, right? And it's not like he lost access to the White House. He just lost, unabetted
a privilege.
He lost a privilege because he knew what he was doing when he did it, right? He said, "Put the spotlight's on me, kids." Jim,
You almost
first
said
of all,
Jamalka, didn't you?
hold on, no.
Okay.
Do you know his real first name?
No.
Ooh,
It's not James?
it is not.
What is it?
So,
Jaime?
no, it's not. It's shit. Now I fucking forgot
Your
it.
phone is failing you.
No, my phone's not failing me.
You're failing
My
you.
mind is failing me. Too many shots from playing football,
Oh, I thought you were doing too many shots of drinking
or too many shots of
Colonel H.
whiskey,
Taylor
or
tonight.
maybe both.
They are not mutually exclusive.
No, that's a negatorial, Ghost Rider.
I'm trying to cover, brother.
No. I know you're trying to cover.
Hit the brakes and fly right by.
Eject. But no, so anyway, Jim Acosta's first name is not Jim, and I have to go back to, I found it, his first name is Abilio. Abilio? Abilio.
Okay.
Abilio.
Well, now, why is that relevant?
It's not.
It's weird.
It's just because it's different.
It
right?
is definitely
like, the guy's name is Jim Acosta, right? Like, you know him as Jim Acosta, but his actual first name is Abilio James
Abilio
Acosta.
Okay.
Right, which is fine. I don't give a shit, but it's just different. It's random. And I guess if I were Trump, I'd be like, Abilio.
I'm amazed he didn't do that.
And I don't know that anyone knows. The only reason I know it is because they filed the lawsuit to get it, and then I looked at it.
You had to see the actual court document.
He had to put his government name on it, And when he put his government name on it, it's like
who the fuck is Abelio?
Well, I looked at it like 3 times. I'm like, wait, is this an immigrant that's like pissed off at Trump? Oh no, this is
Jim Acosta.
This is Jim fucking Acosta. So, and then I was trying to figure out, wait, so is he Italian or is he of Latin descent?
I'm guessing Latin based on the name.
I don't know if that's accurate or true or whatever.
I don't either. And it doesn't really. It's not really relevant.
It's not relevant at all.
It's interesting,
but I think it's fucking hilarious.
And hilarious wins.
Right.
You can agree if it's funny. Print
because
so,
listen.
It's
hard. Like if your first name is Abelio, you better be a badass motherfucker. If you're gonna go by your first name Abelio, and I feel like Jim Acosta early on said, "I'm not gonna be a badass motherfucker, so you're gonna have to go ahead and call me by my middle name." Right? Like,
when
so let's just go with
better
James.
than the story, print the legend. When the joke is better than the truth, print the joke. I'm all for this.
Right.
That's
all I'm saying.
For that.
I feel like at some point in time, Abelio said, "All right, if my first name's going to be Abelio, I am going to have to really knock down
This is not going to work on CNN."
Right. So, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to go with James and Grandpa. I'm sorry. I will pay you tribute some other way. That's what I thought.
Oh, okay.
Either way.
All right. But it's interesting that a judge ruled that they have to give him his press pass back, and
it's interesting to see. I mean, like, so this is what could happen. Like, if they wanted, if the administration wanted to be petty, they could take this.
Totally out of there.
Right. I could see him. Like, we're going to take it to the Supreme Court. If they did that, I mean, I think if they appealed it, they would probably win. But is it worth it? No. Give Abelio his TSA pre-check fast pass back.
You said that made it funnier to me. I don't know how he pulled that off.
Give him his TSA pre-check fast pass back.
Look, the day I lost my TSA pre-check, I was a dick. I traveled to North Carolina, and I had to go through the normal person route. And I was so pissed. Take my shoes off, take my belt off.
You made fun of me. You made fun of me on this show because I had issues with my TSA pre-check and I lost my shit. And you made fun of me talking about how I was snooty and blah, 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 and all that other shit. Welcome to the club, you fuck.
Okay, I don't remember.
I hope your pants fell down when you took your belt off. Saggy bottoms.
They did not, however, I did have to hold on to them so that would not happen. I was so pissed.
You look like a little third grader holding his pants up.
I mean, look, the idea that I was a dick to you on the show is very easy for me to comprehend, so I'm not going to deny that I did it. I don't remember.
Actually, I don't think you know what? I said on the show, I think I was complaining to you on the phone.
Okay.
I had got to whatever my destination was. You had called to ask me about something, and I was bitching about TSA
so I'm not on record.
No,
Either way. I get it.
There you go.
No, I do, because I had to go through that shit.
I know.
I was pissed. All right, moving on, because the world is weird right now. I've used the expression half the world is on fire, and I'm usually talking about the Middle East and the fact that there's wars going on all over the Middle East. A big part of our country is on fire right now.
Literally.
Fucking California is burning to the... That's an exaggeration, but there are...
Parts of California that
are literally burning to the ground. And it's kind of weird because it's affecting a lot of celebrities, which gives it attention. And not to be a dick, but it doesn't... It's hard to sympathize, like, Pierce Brosnan, your fourth home burned down, you're not the same as someone who's only resident.
Let me get you out of this because you're going down a bad path.
All right, I was going to finish.
Here's the reality is that it's so bad. It's so bad what's happening in California that James Woods and Alyssa Milano have had a moment of clarity. Now, James Wood is a staunch conservative, huge supporter of Donald Trump, huge MAGA
and fucking nuts.
And yeah, I mean, he's James Woods. He's a little off. And then you have Alyssa Milano,
and he was great in Casino, by the way. So.
And you have Alyssa Milano, who is very far left, very progressive, #MeToo, very supportive of anything not Donald Trump. And she, her horses were stuck. And James Woods reached out to her and said, what can I do? What can we do? He reached out to his Twitter following and said, how do we resolve this? His people got back to him. He transferred it to her. She used that information, was able to get her horses out. Now, mind you, we're talking about rich
people,
very, very wealthy
horses,
people,
right?
and horses and all that other shit. But still, you know, James Wood and Alyssa Milano are on such far ends of the spectrum that before these fires, if they saw each other in public, they may physically fight each other. Physically, and I mean, Alyssa Milano may literally go and try to claw his eyes out. Like, that's how far that's how opposite ends of the spectrum that they were. But this situation is so bad that you have no choice but to put shit aside and save your life. Right? And help people.
And save as much of your property as you can and deal with it.
It's not even about, at this point, it's not even about horses, property, right? I mean, it's just about get anything, if it's got a heartbeat, get it out.
Right.
That's where they're at. And it's horrible. And now, Trump, oh my God, this guy. He puts out a tweet, like, I mean, the fires are raging, right? It's probably, I don't know, I don't even know how, it's hard to keep track.
It's got to be at least like 20 days now or something.
No. Well, yes, I mean, the fires have been burning now for a while, but it was last week, I think, or early this week, Trump sends out a tweet like, oh, well, if California took better care of their forest management, then this wouldn't be going on. Shame on them, and I'm not going to give them emergency relief and blah, blah, blah. Like, bro, people are literally living in hell on earth.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it is...
People are dying, by the way.
People are dying.
I mean, 65, I think, was the number.
You've got 65 people that have been confirmed dead. You've got 600 people that are missing. It is literally scorched earth. Right? I mean, these fires are burning so hot and for so long, they're not sure that the soil will rebound anytime soon. Right? To where I mean, we're talking
about Malibu. Yeah, we're talking about maybe the wealthiest place in the country. I mean, not that should be a deciding factor, but yet, I mean, it's. I mean, one of my favorite podcasts is Joe Rogan's podcast. He had to evacuate his home.
Yeah.
I'll be really curious to hear, like, what he has to say, because he's.
What can you say? I mean, what can you say? Maybe there's something California could do in terms of forest management, or the federal government, or whoever. I don't know. I know about forest management.
I know a lot about water desalination and water management. And
wait, water what?
Water
removing
management.
the salt from...
Yes, desalination, yes. And it's energy intensive, it's very energy intensive, but it's doable. And they can fucking do it in Dubai, they can do it in California. And they don't. And when I've been in multiple Twitter fights with like Irvine and other Twitter accounts that talk about water management, and they say, conservation is the key. I'm like, conservation is great, but conservation conserves. You have a fucking ocean 20 miles from you or 5 miles from you. There's a lot of water in the ocean, and we know how to take the salt out of that water and make it usable. And it took California like 20 years.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
And I'm not engineer guy, whatever.
Right.
Why do I need to take the salt out to fight the fire?
To fight the fire, you don't. To have an impact after the fact, you do.
Oh, okay. So if you spray a bunch of salt water, okay.
Right, you can put out the fire with salt water, but it'll leave
a negative. Okay, gotcha.
Yes,
gotcha.
Yes. But even regardless of fires, the whole, watering crops.
True.
California grows so fucking much. Steve, when I worked out there, I was working in Irvine, and I would drive through, and the fields of tomato plants and almond fields and all these things were amazing and vast. California provides us so damn much food. And, I mean, they would use sprinklers, they would use stuff, and they were in a drought circumstance. And that is a fixable situation with technology we have. Yeah, it costs a lot of money. Yeah, it costs a lot of energy. However, I go nuts about this, as I'm doing right now, because you have solar power. So
Okay, calm down. Relax. Take
no,
a deep breath.
I'm going to drink more
Take
whiskey.
a sip.
I'm going to drink more whiskey. That place literally has like 350 sun-powered days a year. Mm-hmm. And yes.
So here's let me get you out of this.
Get you out of this while
Let me
I pour
get you out of
whiskey.
this. How much?
I'm putting this next to the.
So
microphone.
one of the.
I want people to hear the whiskey.
I guess can you, if you think about one of the complaints about California, it's ran by Democrats,
right? Too liberal, whatever.
Too liberal, all that stuff.
Now that's a bit of a weird thing,
Yeah,
though.
it's a weird.
It's pocketed, right?
Yeah,
it's
California's
either really liberal or
really
conservative.
Yes, depends on where you are. But I guess the question is, who do you put in power that's open to the idea of? Listen, one of the biggest things killing us right now is water and how water is used. Right? Like we're sitting next to an ocean, yet we have to deal with droughts and we have to deal with fires. So which party is the party that says, yeah, let's figure out how to use the ocean to deal with this issue that we have with forest fires and waters and droughts and everything else, like
and reservoirs and everything.
And everything, like who's better? Who is willing to step up to the plate and resolve that issue? And
if you're asking me sincerely and put me on the spot, I will say Democrats are definitely more to blame than Republicans.
Okay,
clearly they are.
And I wasn't necessarily looking for someone to blame. I'm looking for someone to solve it.
Okay,
right now I'm not.
We're gonna try to solve things. That's crazy.
Weird. Remember we started Stephen Jim fixed the fucking
world while drinking.
While drinking, right? And so I guess I want to know who is willing to step up to the plate and say, all right, we've got all this salt water here. Let's figure out how to make it not salt water and use as much of it as we can to fill the reservoirs and water the crops and counteract the fact that we're in California and part of it's a desert and we have to deal with droughts and the snow caps from NorCal don't always make it all the way down to Southern California. Let's figure it out. Someone's got to step up to the plate.
Someone does.
And I don't actually care if they're Republican or Democrat, but that's the solution to the problem. You have a fucking resource that resolves the issue, yet you're not using it. So figure it the fuck out. Somebody.
I could not agree with you more.
I don't care if it's Stacey fucking Dash.
Agreed.
That would be ideal.
That should be.
No, I'm about to get myself in
and
trouble.
we're about to derail. All right, but no, Steve, that technology it's not complicated. You boil water, you recondense it, you use it, you take the salt out. It's there.
Ooh,
it is very
science.
It is very.
You're getting my panties wet with the science.
Okay, that got awkward. But it's again, it's expensive. It's energy intensive, but it can be done with renewable energy like solar very easily, and it just doesn't fucking happen, and it drives me
Where's
crazy.
your boy Elon Musk on this, or Elon Musk, or whatever?
Elon's right. You know what? I don't recall him ever weighing in on this. I don't know why. And he is my boy. I'm not dismissing Elon. He's my boy.
I don't think you can at this point.
At this point, I've pretty much owned it. All right, man. California, it's fixable. Get your water situation straight. You have a fucking ocean next to like 1,000 miles of coastline. Don't try to calm me down.
I'm not trying to calm you down. Let's easily transition into the next topic.
Because the next time is really fucking ugly.
It is. And so why don't you bring it in? So
Jemel Roberson was a security guard in the outskirts of Chicago. A black security guard, I believe 26 years old. He was working at a bar where there was a shooting. He chased and restrained the shooter, and while doing that, was shot to death by police.
Okay, whoa, hold on. You're leaving all sorts of stuff out. All right, let me try to recap this one more time. Sorry. So Jemel Roberson was a security guard at a bar who was armed. He was an armed security guard who had 99% of the licensing required. There's some reports out there saying that he didn't have a concealed and carry or whatever. But long story short, he was a security guard with a gun. Someone got removed from the club. That person came back into the club and started shooting. People were injured. No one was killed in the club. Roberson returned fire and was able to subdue one of the people who came back into the club. Roberson subdued that person. Police were there shortly thereafter. And Roberson ended up getting shot and killed himself. And now we're here. He was shot and killed by a police officer who was responding to the active shooter. And so now we're trying to figure out what the hell happened.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, we talk about inappropriate or questionable police shootings all the time on our show. I mean, a big part of what started us talking was that in this case, it just seems awful on so many levels. Because this guy was not only not part of the problem, he was trying to be part of the solution.
Well, he was part of the solution because he was able to prevent multiple people from being killed.
Okay, exactly.
I mean, because you had an active live shooter, and he was able to return fire and prevent, another mass
shooting,
a mass shooting,
mass murder. Yes,
where multiple people were killed, and this.
We didn't say he's black. The officer that shot him is white.
Well, you just did.
I just did, okay. But it wasn't before.
The issue is, fast forward past a lot of it, and you get to a crossroads sort of situation where, one of the NRA and a lot of your Second Amendment gun advocates will tell you that we need more guns, and good people with guns, good guys with guns are good because they can help prevent these incidents with mass shooters. If you've got a good guy with a gun in a situation where a mass shooter comes in, that person can either stave off or stop or debilitate the mass shooter that comes in, the bad guy with the gun. And it's obvious why you could easily buy into that. But the argument has been, well, when the police get there and they have been told that there's an active shooter and there's a guy there with a gun, how are they supposed to differentiate between the bad guy and the good guy? And there's never been a great response to that sort of rebuttal to the good guy with the gun argument. And this does not bode well for the good guy with the gun argument, because you've got a good guy with a gun, a guy who wanted to be a police officer, according to friends and family. He was a security guard at a bar. He had most of the proper licensing, and the only reason I'm saying that is because I saw a story that said he had a permit to own, but he didn't have a permit to carry or something.
Illinois is a brutal state. With
it is. It's really tough.
Who knows? But who cares?
Right, but I mean, so he stopped. So this guy stops this
an active shooter,
really an active shooter from happening. And there was more than one person, but he subdued the person. The police show up, and there's mixed reports on what happened at that point.
Right,
and so
there's no video that I'm aware of.
Well, we don't. I don't know if there's video. Everyone's asking if there is. It needs to be released. I'm sure if there is, it'll be in 3 months. 30 to 90 days from now. But what I will say is, this is one. It's a horrible situation, right? Just so sad that this guy died. All the blame goes on the people who came back, who were kicked out and came back and decided to shoot the club up. All the blame goes on them, first and foremost, because they're the catalyst for all of this. If they what? Agreed. Sorry, you got booted. All right, then you leave. Then you leave and you go home,
or go to the next club.
Right, or you go to the next club. Or if you're that pissed about it, then fucking throw your fist.
Yeah, or
go
whatever.
On Yelp. But everything except for go out in your car and go get a gun and come back in and shoot. So first and foremost, that's where all the blame should go. Now, in terms of the police officer, we don't know enough facts. We haven't seen video. On video, we've seen enough videos to know that sometimes they only create more questions, but we don't even have that right now. All we have are multiple reports from a lot of people who weren't there. And what I can tell you is I'm not going to initially jump all over the police officer because, again, you've got a police officer who was told active shooter. Comes to the scene, sees a person with a gun, and we don't know what happened. Did he yell a command? Now, the issue with that is you've got the security guard, Roberson, who is in a situation where someone came in shooting. He was aware enough to return fire and had the ability to subdue the person. But at this point in time, his heartbeat has got to be, his heart rate's got to be up into the fucking 160s, 170s, 180s. Sure. He probably can hear his heartbeat in his ears. Sure. I mean, he's probably, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, his adrenaline's kicked through the roof. He's on top of someone who may or may not have a gun, who, if he lets up any, may turn over, roll over, and try to shoot him. You've got people screaming left and right. So maybe the police officer did say, drop your weapon and go to your knees. And chances are he didn't hear him, right? Like we've seen enough stress tests with police officers and with people in general in these sort of situations, even people who are well-trained who miss directives because of their adrenaline levels, because of the stress, because of everything that's going on. So the idea that this kid missed a command isn't far-fetched at all, right? And so what do we put on the officer who then comes into a situation with an active shooter, sees a person with a gun on top of another person, whether the person had a security guard shirt on or not? It's hard for me to criticize him for that because, again, he's walking into a stressful situation. His adrenaline is up. Doesn't matter how much he's trained. I mean, hopefully he's trained very well, but I mean, you can argue maybe he wasn't, but even if you're well trained, maybe you miss the fact that he's wearing a shirt that says security, or maybe you can't see it because his back is to you, and you see a guy on top of another guy with a gun in his back, and you're coming into an active shooter situation. How do you know that this guy is a security? Just because people are saying that's a security guard, you don't know who those people are, and you're walking into a very volatile situation. I don't know if I'm initially going to say the officer was automatically at fault, and this was all race-based, and had Roberson been white, he wouldn't be dead. I can't jump to any of those conclusions right now because I just don't know enough, and there are enough variables for me to look at this situation and say, it is awful, it is tragic, it does nothing for solving our gun issue in America, and I don't know if I can hold the officer accountable for this kid's death.
It does nothing to solve the gun issue, and it does nothing to solve the race issue. I can't argue with anything you just said. I will say that this is so when you're judging an officer in the moment, it's really easy for you and I to sit here in my sweatshirt and your shirt and tie and say, I would have been cool, calm, and collected. And no, we wouldn't have been. I mean, we're responding to an active shooter situation. It is got to be terrifying. Having said that, this guy got shot to death in a situation where he was doing his job and doing it well. And while that, I don't want to say it was unavoidable, because I think it was avoidable. This comes down to the,
Wait, what was avoidable?
His death. If the officer shows up and tases him, or hesitates a second and says, "Who are you? Put your hands up." And again, I'm not qualified to justify.
I think you're walking down a dangerous road in that situation.
Okay,
you know what I mean.
But am I wrong?
I don't. I mean,
we don't. I mean, it's not my life. It's not my path. But
I don't listen. I guess my big thing is, there's two issues. Did Roberson turn and point the gun at the officer?
I don't know.
I don't know. Now, the other part is is the officer thinking, if I don't shoot him and this is the active shooter and he's got a gun to the back of somebody's head, is he going to blow that guy's head off, and is that guy the innocent person? And so
right.
I think there's a lot of variables in there
Steve.
before you go in there and say this is what the officer should have done, right? I mean, neither of us are police officers. Neither of us have had the training in that sort of situation, which is why I can't jump to the conclusion on anything here. I can't. Right?
Okay.
I mean, if next week we want to bring somebody in who
Maybe
has
happens to be a former police
right?
officer.
I mean, or is a current police officer, or is a current, ATF or FBI or someone
right.
in those situations, then we can have that conversation as to what is
How
your
do you
training.
handle a situation?
One, what is your experience? Two, what does your training tell you, or vice versa, or whatever.
Next week is Thanksgiving, and I'll be in the middle of deer hunting.
Right. But I'm just
whatever.
saying, I don't think either of us are qualified to make an assessment or a judgment on that particular situation, given one, we've never been in it,
Sure.
and we've never been trained for it, because I think there are so many variables there that this one is, of a lot of the things that we've talked about, where I think there are many other cases that are much more clear of a violation of a person's rights,
Civil rights, right.
than what this is. Right, this is
Yeah, no,
this is ugly and it's not good. But I don't know,
Steve. It's fucking tragic.
It-
right?
it's terrible.
because this guy seems like a really good guy who was trying to make something happen for a family, and gets gunned down, and
trying to do the right thing, and it is
and
very sad.
Look, I've defended cops in situations where it was not popular to do so. So I am not anti-cop by any means. I think, based on what I've read, it seems like this. All right, it was avoidable, brother.
Again,
yeah.
what I'll say is it was avoidable if the assholes who came back into the club and started shooting it up, if they don't do that, that's how it's avoidable. Everything after that.
No,
listen,
there's
if
no argument there.
I'm a prosecutor, I will tell you right now, if I'm a prosecutor, I'm pinning this death on the people who came back into the club and started shooting
assholes.
it up.
Okay.
And I will, and the way I'll do it is through the felony murder charge. If you commit a felony and someone dies in the process of you committing said felony, then you are charged with that murder. And I would absolutely charge the person who started this with felony murder.
All right, man. We're over an hour, and I want to talk about two things. One of them personal for you, sports-wise, and one of them personal for you, culture-wise.
Okay, so I'll jump into it because it's on the board. The first one is LeVeon Bell. If you're an NFL fan, or you happen to be a Steeler fan, or a football fan, or whatever, you are probably aware of the fact that LeVeon Bell bypassed $14 million this season, set out because he's anticipating a much bigger contract at the end of the year. A lot of people have been very critical of LeVeon Bell for doing this. And
I read your article on WhiskeyCongress.com.
Right, I did write about this on WhiskeyCongress.com. I tried to be as objective as possible.
You did a very good job of being objective.
Oh, well,
you spelled it all out. And while I don't necessarily agree with LeVeon Bell's decision, because I don't care, I'm not a Steelers fan, but I think you did a great job of spelling out his tactical decisions.
Right, and so I'll summarize it here as briefly as I can. He was eligible to be a free agent. The NFL has the franchise tag. The Steelers franchise tagged him last year at $12.2 million. They franchise tagged him again at the beginning of this season for $14.4 or $5 million. He, instead of taking the $14.5 million for 1 year, which would have been guaranteed, he opted to sit out. And he's sitting out the whole year, and everyone's up in arms about it. And they're saying, you're leaving $14 million on the table. You're an idiot. Why would you do that? You can never recoup that money again, right? His argument is that I play running back. Over the last 5 seasons, I've touched the ball more than any other non-quarterback, than any other player in the league. I've also produced more yardage than any other player in the league. The only player who's come close to me is Eric Dickerson, and that was 20 fucking years ago, longer than that, 30 years ago.
Well,
So,
Jim was still watching football as a young man.
right, exactly. So, I mean, like this is before,
old.
I mean, like that was before your West Virginia days. Right?
Yeah. No,
I mean, Eric Dickerson.
Eric Dickerson was actually part of
Right.
the 1987 trade between the Buffalo Bills, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Los Angeles Rams in 1989 or
right.
8.
I mean, those years. I mean, I think a couple of those years were with the Rams for Eric Dickerson, and then another couple were with the Colts. But all that being said, like LeVeon Bell has been a highly productive player. He's playing a position that is not nearly as protected as a quarterback, because a lot of people will say, well, Kirk Cousins was franchise tagged 2 years in a row. Kirk Cousins is a quarterback and doesn't get hit nearly as much as LeVeon Bell does every time he touches the ball, unless he gets the ball and runs untouched for a touchdown, he's going to get tackled, right? So there's always a risk for injury in that report, or in that scenario.
Right.
So he looked at it and said, given the number of times I've touched the ball over the course of my career, given the number of yards that I produced, one, I'm worth more than what the Steelers have offered. I'm worth more than just the $14 million that you're offering me for this particular year. And with that number of touches, the chances that I'm going to get hurt or injured are high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit out and skip this year, become a free agent at the end of the year, and then sign a contract with a whole lot of guaranteed money along with the salary that's front loaded, that will, obviously, dissipate as he gets older and less productive. To me, oddly enough, it's the right move. And I think that everyone here made the right move. Right? I think that LeVeon Bell made the right choice. And the reason why is Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas is a safety for the Seattle Seahawks, who was also a free agent, who was also franchise tagged. And I can't remember what his tag was because he was a safety. It was a different position.
Right,
but
right,
it was for a whole lot of money.
Yeah, I think $14 million.
He signed his tender. He played. Game 4, breaks his leg. So now he gets that money for this year. But he then has to recover from a broken leg. And our team's going to be willing to sign him to the contract that they were willing to sign him before he was injured. Or they're going to say, we'll sign you for a year, we'll see how you do, and then we'll figure out your long-term contract. Well, whatever that long-term contract is, whether he gets it next season, 2019 or 2020, is going to be less than what it was had he not been injured. And so LeVeon Bell is pointing to that and saying, that is why I am not playing this year. I will play once I am signed to a contract that represents my value that I bring to the game, to the team that I'm playing for.
I get that. And I literally, in this case, I feel like I understand both parties. Because if you're the Steelers, you're saying, all right, if you want me to commit $60 million to a 27-year-old running back, we're not going to do that.
Yeah,
because frankly, running backs don't last.
Well,
and that's shitty, but it's true.
Well, it's kind of true, but kind of not. I think part of that is mythology, right? Like there are
kind of his history too, though.
No, it's not though. I mean, actually, if you go back, there's plenty of running backs that,
running backs break down faster than other positions.
Running backs do break down.
And you're a former running back, I understand.
Listen, what I'm saying is though, running backs do break down, absolutely, and their value has definitely been diminished over time. But part of that is, part of the diminishing aspect of that is kind of false, a red herring, a false narrative. I don't know how to explain it. Because, listen,
look,
I'll give you a prime...
LeVeon Bell is special.
I'll give you a prime example.
Bring it.
Adrian Peterson, he was done last year, right?
Right, and then he's not. He's
not.
And,
right?
Look, Steve, you're right, but you're wrong.
No, I'm not, because this is why. Because a guy hits a certain age, playing running back, a guy hits the age of 30, and teams say, well, according to the metrics and according to the numbers, once you hit 30, you're no longer productive, you're no longer good, you're on your downhill slide, we're not going to pay you, we're not going to sign you, and they don't. Right? And that's it. Right? Like, they're just like, well, you hit 30, I don't care how good you look, how fast you are, what your 40 time is, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're 30, and the numbers and historical data tell us that means that you're no longer an effective player, so we're not going to sign you, and we're going to go younger.
Let's be fair. You have a personal.
No, I don't. But
Yes,
I just
you do.
no, Jim, I don't. I'm saying like this is how the league works.
Right, okay.
They literally say you have like they and people in the league will tell you this. Right? They will just like, listen, he's 30 years old. Why would I sign him when I can go find a 23-year-old guy
and the
from
truth is
any
you
school?
can.
Right, and you can, but does that mean that the guy can't play still?
No,
at a high level.
No, it does not mean he can't play.
It doesn't
just
mean
means
he
you can
can't
find
play.
a cheaper guy at the same
if
or
it's-
comparable level.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean that the guy can't necessarily play, and it doesn't mean that he can't play at a high level. And Adrian Peterson is feeling, and then we've had
and LeVeon Bell is a freak. I mean, his ability to find space amongst tacklers and then explode is ridiculous.
Now, and the key with LeVeon Bell is that aspect that you're talking about right there, his patience, his ability to not
Read
take
people around
his
him, yes.
not take hard hits, not get hit
Right.
directly, not
I mean,
ever.
I'm a Bills fan. I'm a LeSean McCoy fan.
when
LeSean
have you-
McCoy is a freakish animal himself.
Pause.
All right.
But Le'Veon Bell rarely gets hit in the backfield and goes down. Rarely gets hit and goes backwards. Rarely gets hit in awkward positions. Like he's constantly like he rarely takes those devastating hits. Now, that being said, he does have an injury history. Right? He did have a season where he had some issues with marijuana. Right? Where he's hanging out with LeGarrette Blount. And LeGarrette Blount had some maturity issues.
Ironically named LeGarrette Blount.
Right, but then he went to the Patriots and figured it out and won a Super Bowl. So, and then he went to Philadelphia and won a Super Bowl. So apparently,
you're right.
He was able to figure some things out. But what I'm saying is, Le'Veon Bell is doing the right thing, and the Steelers are doing the right thing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't blame you.
Right? Like,
I
I
don't
mean,
give a shit, to be honest with you.
it's free market capitalism. He's taking his stance. The only thing I guess Le'Veon Bell technically did wrong was he didn't like he pussyfooted around the issue.
He did, do
Right?
that.
Like after the preseason,
He definitely
after the preseason,
tiptoed.
if you weren't going to play every game, as soon as you weren't going to play in game one and collect all $14 million, then there was absolutely no reason for you to play in any game after that. Because if you weren't going to play for $14 million, why would you play for 12, 11, 10, 9, 5, 6, right? Like,
Right.
as soon, like there was no
fair
reason for
point,
it.
fair
right?
point.
Like, so the only mistake that he made was he should have just said, you know what? You guys don't provide me a contract that I feel worthy, then I'm just going to sit out. He should have done that before week one, after the end of the preseason, and it should have been done. That's the only mistake that he made. And after this, and if you don't think, like, and people are saying, well, he set out a year, and his value is going to go down, and he's not going to be as good. He's a year older.
That will
he's
be
not,
Steve, that'll be a curious thing to me. No?
You know why?
Why?
Because I'll point to you and I'll say Ricky Williams.
Okay. Ricky Williams.
Ricky Williams set out.
I love that story.
Ricky Williams set out of the league
3 years.
twice
3 years.
for a full year.
Right.
And Ricky Williams still
Bounced back and he did just fine.
And
he said,
if Ricky
"You have
Williams,
a problem with drug versus marijuana," and he said like sugar, and I mocked him, and he was absolutely fucking right because sugar kills way more people.
way
than marijuana.
more than marijuana does, and I think that if marijuana wasn't so taboo as it was in the late '90s, early 2000s, Ricky Williams
played more years, yeah.
would have been a Hall of Fame player, and you could maybe make an argument for him. I'm not sure. I would have to look and see where he's at on all-time lists. But Ricky Williams was unfucking believable.
Oh, in college, it was amazing.
But still, I mean, like the guy set out twice for extended periods of time and came back and was able to be a productive player.
All right.
So if you don't think that a guy like Le'Veon Bell, who takes supreme care of his body, trains at the highest level, can catch, has the softest hands, has unbelievable timing, awareness, and burst. If you think that all of a sudden that's going to go away after a year, child, please. And, by the way, right? Like, think about this. If he hadn't set out, let's just say he broke an ankle.
That would change his marketability.
No.
Dramatically.
No. Just listen to me.
All right.
Let's just say he broke an ankle.
All right.
No, not even an ankle. Let's say he broke a wrist and had to sit out, right? If he broke a wrist, or let's say he tore a tricep, right? Broke a wrist, tore a tricep, nothing affecting his legs.
All right.
And he had to sit out a year. Would you after he tore a tricep or broke a wrist, would you say, like, next year, and he was still under contract, LeVeon Bell's not going to be that good?
See, I tore a tricep years ago, granted as a fat engineer.
You are not a great comparison, but okay.
No, I'm not. But I know what that was like to recover from, and it was brutal.
Mm-hmm. That being said, would you say that LeVeon Bell...
That would have hurt his marketability dramatically.
You're stupid. No, it wouldn't have.
What?
Nope.
Oh, Steve. If you can't straighten your arm and... Oh, my God. You fucking
Why
kidding
wouldn't
me?
he be able to straighten his arm?
Because he tore a tricep.
Jim, I can go on my phone right now and go on Instagram and show you powerlifters who have ripped their pectoral muscles literally off the fucking bone, who come back a year and a half later and able to bench press 600 fucking pounds.
So we're actually, I think, agreeing and disagreeing. I'm saying it would have hurt his ability in the short run, but he could have come back from it.
No, we're not agreeing at all. What I'm saying is he would have been able to. He would be
off because he. Look, that was horrible.
Yeah, it sucked for you. But you're fucking Jim. He's Le'Veon Bell, and he's got access to doctors and nutrition and supplement and the whole fucking thing, right? Like you're fucking Jim. I don't know what your rehab was. Like
my rehab was minimal.
Right.
Okay. All right. We can fight about this, but I don't want to fight about this.
It's not a fight.
Call it a
You've
comeback.
lost.
All right, brother.
You just compared yourself to Le'Veon Bell,
and I think it's a fair comparison. Neither of us keep a straight face through that or come close. All right, Steven, we're way over an hour.
I know.
And Stan Lee died.
Stan Lee.
And you, sir, are a comic book fanatic.
I am.
And Stan Lee died.
He did.
And I want you to give a chance to give him a tribute.
So Stan Lee is an interesting figure in the world of comic books. He is one of the most influential people in probably their industry. And there's a lot of controversy that goes with that. He did a lot of work with Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was a really great comic book writer and artist and everything else who probably didn't get the credit that he deserved. But Stan Lee was just a character and a personality that stood above the rest. And the world that he created and his team created in Marvel, and even the guys over at DC, is just magnificent. But Marvel is different because it's the real world. It's New York City, Manhattan, Queens, Hell's Kitchen, the Bronx, Harlem. It's Germany. It's Africa, and Wakanda is not a real place, but still you get the feel for it. He created something that allowed a guy like me who was isolated as a kid, as a black kid growing up in Texas, who had to deal with a lot of racism at a young age, and I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand why, but you know, I had no place to go, and my dad introduced me to comic books, and the Marvel universe opened up a world to me where I would get picked on and bullied in school, and I could go home and I could read comic books, and that was my place of refuge. And that eventually turned into something where it gave me confidence. It gave me something to model myself after. Now, I'm not a superhero by any stretch of the imagination, but what it did was it allowed me to create a voice, and I had to take it from the pages of Spider-Man and Iron Man and the X-Men, but I had to use it. And Stan Lee did that for me. Without it, I don't know where I'd be right now. What I can tell you is what Stan Lee meant for me was he allowed me to have a personality and a confidence that if without it, I never would have gone out for sports. I never would have played a sport because I never would have thought I was capable of doing it. Like, listen, I was an asthmatic kid who was blind as a bat. I was chubby and I felt as unathletic as anyone could be, and mostly because I was blind and I couldn't breathe because I had asthma and I lived in Texas next to a goddamn cotton field. Thanks, parents.
And you became a fucking physical freak and deadlift 750 pounds.
Let me explain that to you, though. But part of that was you read these comic books and the way they drew these characters. You said, I want to look like that. I want to look like Thor. I want to look like the Hulk. I want to look like Captain America. I want to look like fucking
Steve,
T'Challa. And it's like, how the fuck do I look like that? Right?
Do you know people have told me, like, how do you do a show with this guy? Aren't you afraid he's going to Hulk out on you? And I'm like, no, I'm not, because Steve and I are friends. But yes, physically, he is a monster. Because physically, brother, you are a monster.
I'm a larger individual. No, I'm a larger individual. That's fair.
I'm a thick guy, and you make me look like Pee Wee fucking Herman.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny. Me and a couple of my other buddies from back home were exchanging texts, and I said,
Here we go.
So here's the deal. I was in a random office, and I had to go to the bathroom. I had to go take a shit, and I walk into this bathroom, and there's like a kickstand under the toilet. So I sent the picture to my buddies. I'm like, so I found a secluded bathroom. I got to do my business, but like I don't feel comfortable with this toilet. And my buddy is just like, well, they threw the kickstand in there for the 300-pound guy who might come in, a little bit of extra support. And my response to him was, fuck you. I was 294.2 this morning, you motherfucker.
I'm not trying to interrupt.
But anyway, all that being said, in regards to Stan Lee, he gave me confidence. He gave me refuge. He made me feel better. Like Stan Lee was very progressive when it came to racial issues and civil rights things. And I in the early 80s, late 80s, I was a kid in Texas, a black kid in Texas, dealing with this shit, and I didn't even know what I was dealing with. But reading his comic books,
kid, dude.
I was a kid. I was
7, 8 years old.
8, 9, 10 years old, dealing with this shit. I didn't even know what I was dealing with, but his comic books made me feel better about myself and about my situation. And when I got to a better situation, it allowed me to have a confidence that I didn't have. Seeing guys, seeing a Peter Parker who was a nerd by day but a superhero by night, let me know that, hey, maybe I can be the kid who, reads and comprehends very well and scores well on his tests, but, I can do other things, which led me to playing sports and really finding my passions and finding things that mattered to me. So Stan Lee passing, even with all his controversy between whether he didn't give other people credit or he was just a touchy-feely, creepy old man.
Whatever.
All that being said, he will be missed. He built a legacy between Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios. Rest in power, brother.
Agreed. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. Steven, let's call it a night. You good?
I'm good.
Love you, man.
Oh.